Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing. Once upon a time, there were two siblings, Jack and Emma. They lived in a small town called Pinebrook, in a cozy house on Maple Street. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were always busy with work. Jack was 9 years old and Emma was 7. They spent a lot of time alone at home, and though they didn't enjoy it, they tried to make the best of it by playing games or drawing. But there was always the TV, calling them with its bright lights and loud music. One evening, while their parents were still at work, Jack was watching TV when something caught his attention. It was a show that seemed different from what they usually watched. There were flashing lights, fast music, and adults talking in a way that was unfamiliar to Jack. Curious, he called to Emma, who was in the other room. Emma, come here and look at this, Jack called. Emma ran into the living room, her eyes wide with curiosity. She sat beside Jack, both of them staring at the screen in awe. They didn't understand much of what was happening, but it seemed exciting. Why are they doing that? Emma asked innocently, confused by what she was seeing. I don't know, Jack replied, his voice full of wonder. Maybe it's something fun that grown-ups do. The images on the screen continued, leaving them more confused but also intrigued. They had no idea that what they were watching was something meant for adults, not children. It was the first time they had ever seen something like that. After a few days, the images they had seen on TV stayed in their minds. Jack found himself thinking about it constantly. One afternoon, when their parents were away, Jack turned to Emma with a mischievous smile. Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing, saying things like, Remember when we sneaked out last time and no one found out? If you don't do this, I'll tell Mom and Dad. Emma felt trapped. She didn't know what to do, so reluctantly she agreed. Okay, Jack, she whispered. They went to the bedroom and tried to copy what they had seen on TV. But as soon as it happened, Emma felt pain she didn't expect. She screamed and ran to the living room, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. Jack, I never want to do that again. It hurts so much, she cried, feeling scared and confused. Jack didn't understand why Emma was so upset. He still thought it was just part of a game. But Emma felt deep inside that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like their usual fun games. This was painful and scary. As the days went by, Emma noticed that Jack was changing. He was more insistent, more stubborn, and she didn't recognize him as the brother she once knew. She felt more and more alone in her confusion. One day, Mrs. Thompson came home briefly to pick up some things. Emma saw her chance and tried to speak up. Mom, can I talk to you? She asked, her voice shaking. Mrs. Thompson, distracted by her phone and rushing around, barely looked up. Not now, Emma. I'm busy, she said, without giving her daughter a second thought. Emma stood there for a moment, her heart sinking. She wanted to tell her mom about everything that had happened, but it felt like no one was listening. Emma retreated to her room, feeling invisible. The next day, after Jack asked Emma to do the same thing again, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the house, not knowing where to go. She ended up standing at the door of their neighbor, Aunt Grace. Aunt Grace knelt down to meet Emma at eye level, concerned by the look on her face. What's wrong, Emma? She asked gently. Emma burst into tears and told Aunt Grace everything, how Jack had kept asking her to copy what they had seen on TV, how scared and confused she was, and how she felt trapped. Aunt Grace wrapped Emma in a comforting hug. You did the right thing by telling me, she said. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here for you. With Aunt Grace's help, Emma felt a little better. She was safe now. Aunt Grace promised to help her, and Emma finally felt a sense of relief. When Mr. and Mrs. Thompson found out what had happened, they were shocked. Mr. Thompson didn't believe it at first. "Jack wouldn't do something like that," he said. Mrs. Thompson tried to downplay the situation, but Aunt Grace stood firm. Children see things on TV, and if they're not guided, they try to make sense of it in their own way, Aunt Grace explained. "You've been so focused on work that you didn't see what your children were watching. This is a warning." Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were silent. They realized that their neglect had allowed their children to be exposed to things they didn't understand. The Thompsons knew they had to change. They began to monitor what Jack and Emma watched on TV and made sure it was age-appropriate. They also encouraged their children to talk about their feelings and thoughts. Jack and Emma started seeing a counselor to help them understand what had happened and heal from the experience. Slowly, their home changed. Mrs. Thompson reduced her work hours, and Mr. Thompson started spending more time with his children on weekends. They all played games together, read stories, and enjoyed being a family again. Jack and Emma began to laugh again, rediscovering the bond they once shared. The painful silence was replaced by love, laughter, and the warmth of a family who had learned the importance of being there for each other. One evening, as they played a game together, Emma turned to her parents with a small smile. "Thank you for listening to me," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. Her words brought tears to her mother's eyes, and the family knew that they had made a fresh start. The Thompsons understood that the greatest gift they could give each other was their time, attention, and love. And with that, they promised to always be there for one another. This is the end of our story. It teaches us that the most important thing we can do for our children is to listen and love them. They should always feel heard and understood. Change begins when we listen to their voices. So if you find my video interesting, kindly give me a follow and peace. In the heart of a bustling city, a woman named Clary settled into her new life with her husband Tom and his teenage son Leo. Clara had married Tom 2 years prior, drawn to his warmth and kindness, and she was eager to embrace her role as a stepmother. Leo, however, was a different story. At 16, he was reserved, often retreating into the world of video games and solitude, still grappling with the loss of his mother years earlier. Clara was determined to create a welcoming home for Leo. She filled their apartment with laughter, cooking meals, and inviting him to share in family activities. Yet their conversations remained sparse. One day while preparing dinner, Clara mustered the courage to ask Leo about school. He replied nonchalantly, "It's fine," and quickly returned to his room, leaving Clara to wonder if he would ever open up. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, Leo began to share glimpses of his life. He talked about friends, school projects, and his passion for music. Clara felt grateful for this budding connection, hoping Leo would see her as someone he could trust. But then something shifted one quiet evening as they sat at the dinner table. Tom was out for a meeting, leaving Clara and Leo alone. Out of nowhere, Leo looked at her and said, "You're really nice to me." Clara chuckled lightly, responding, "Of course, Leo. I care about you." The moment hung in the air, charged with unspoken feelings. Leo's gaze lingered, and Clara felt an unsettling flutter in her stomach. She brushed it off, telling herself it was simply the innocence of a teenager. But as days passed, the nature of their interactions began to change. Leo started to seek her out, lingering close during movie nights or offering to help with chores. One night, while they were cleaning the living room, Leo shared memories of his late mother. "I just miss her so much," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara, feeling a surge of empathy, reached for his hand. "She would be proud of who you're becoming," she assured him. The connection felt profound, yet it left Clara feeling uneasy. That night, Clara tossed and turned in bed, replaying their conversation and Leo's gaze. Was this all in her head? Was there something deeper happening between them? As she tried to convince herself that everything was fine, her heart felt heavy with confusion. Days turned into a blur of normalcy, yet Clara felt the weight of an unspoken tension with Leo. He continued to be helpful, always there with a kind word or a gesture. One afternoon, as Clara chopped vegetables in the kitchen, Leo stepped in to lend a hand. "Do you need help?" he asked, a soft smile on his face. "I'd love some," Clara replied, grateful for his company. As they worked side by side, Leo paused and looked at her intently. "You make this place feel like home," he said quietly. Clara's heart raced at his words. She thanked him, feeling both flattered and alarmed. From that moment, Leo sought even more closeness. Whenever Clara was in the living room, he would sit beside her, and if she went to the garden, he would join her. "You're so caring, Clara," he would say. "I wish my mom could have met you." His words made her feel special, yet also uncertain. One evening, the atmosphere shifted drastically. Clara was curled up on the couch with a book when Leo approached. They began to chat, sharing laughter over funny passages. Suddenly, Leo placed his hand on hers and Clara froze. "Leo, what are you doing?" she asked softly. "I just wanted to thank you for everything," he replied, sincerity in his eyes. Clara gently withdrew her hand, trying to maintain composure. "You don't need to thank me. We're family," she said, though inside a storm of emotions raged. That night, Clara locked her bedroom door, her hands trembling as she replayed Leo's gesture in her mind. Should she tell Tom? Could she even confront this confusion? She decided to stay silent, telling herself it was just a moment of confusion on Leo's part, that he would move on. But the next days were a struggle. Clara avoided being alone with Leo, fearing the intensity of their situation. Yet he continued to reach out, trying to bridge the widening gap. Each time they were near, Clara felt an unspoken bond that both thrilled and terrified her. One afternoon while Tom was out, Leo knocked on Clara's bedroom door. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Clara's heart raced. "Not right now, Leo. I need some space," she replied firmly. Yet the tension hung heavily in the air, and she felt trapped in her own home. Days turned into a cycle of avoidance and confusion. When Tom returned, Clara felt a sense of relief, but the weight of her secret gnawed at her. One night, as they lay in bed together, Clara knew she couldn't keep this hidden forever. The silence felt unbearable. After breakfast the next morning, Clara made a choice. She needed to tell Tom everything. With a shaking voice, she asked him to sit down. "It's about Leo," she began, her heart pounding. Tom's expression shifted, concern etched on his face. "Is he okay?" he asked. Clara took a deep breath, pouring out everything, how Leo had been acting, the unsettling moments, and her struggle to manage it all. Tom listened intently, his expression changing from confusion to concern. "I can't believe this," he finally said. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Clara admitted, tears pooling in her eyes. "I didn't want to ruin our family." Tom nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We need to fix this," he said firmly. Later that day, Tom spoke with Leo, and Clara stayed in the kitchen, her heart racing. Eventually, Tom returned, looking both exhausted and relieved. "Leo understands he crossed a line. He's staying with his aunt for a while," he said. Clara felt a mix of relief and sadness. That night, as Tom held her hand, Clara knew they had taken a crucial step toward healing. "We'll get through this together," he reassured her, and she nodded, feeling the burden begin to lift. In that moment, Clara realized that while the journey ahead would be difficult, they would face it as a united family. If you like my stories, kindly subscribe to my channel to stay updated to my weekly tales. Peace. Marcos Rojas, known as El Diablo, was a feared drug lord who controlled a huge criminal empire. His reach stretched from South America to Europe, and he made millions by selling drugs. He was known for being cruel, and he used violence to keep everyone under control. His mansion was guarded like a fortress, and the people who worked for him were too scared to defy him. El Diablo had many servants who did his bidding. They had to obey him, no matter what. If they didn't, they would be killed without hesitation. One of his most trusted servants was Arturo. Arturo had worked for El Diablo for many years, rising from a poor man with no power to one of the drug lord's right-hand men. Arturo did everything for El Diablo, even killing when ordered. But over time, Arturo started to feel uneasy. He had seen too much pain and destruction caused by El Diablo. He began to feel guilty for all the people who had died because of the drug lord. Arturo realized that El Diablo wasn't a man to be feared. He was a monster. Every day he watched as people's lives were ruined, families were torn apart, and even innocent people died. Arturo couldn't ignore it anymore. The man he had served for so long was a tyrant, and Arturo knew he had to do something to stop him. One night, after El Diablo ordered the death of an old friend who had become useless to him, Arturo decided it was time. He couldn't stay in the drug lord's service any longer. He couldn't watch any more innocent people suffer. With a heavy heart, Arturo walked into El Diablo's private room. El Diablo was sitting calmly in a chair as usual. When he saw Arturo, he smiled. "Arturo," El Diablo said smoothly, "did you take care of the job as I asked?" "Yes, my lord," Arturo replied, but inside he felt like he was going to explode. He knew what he had to say next. "I can't do this anymore," Arturo said. His voice was shaky but firm. "I can't serve you any longer. I can't keep doing your dirty work." El Diablo's face darkened. He stared at Arturo with cold eyes. No one had ever dared to speak to him like that before. For a moment, El Diablo didn't say anything. Then slowly he stood up. "You want to betray me?" El Diablo asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I made you. You were nothing before I found you. You owe everything to me." Arturo stood tall, but his heart was pounding. "I don't owe you anything. I can't live with the blood on my hands anymore. I'm done." El Diablo stepped closer, his anger rising. "You think you can just leave me? I have the power to destroy you in an instant. No one betrays me and lives." But Arturo didn't back down. He had made up his mind. "It ends tonight." El Diablo's eyes flashed with rage. He raised his hand, signaling for his guards to attack. But before the guards could rush in, the door to the room flew open. Miguel, an old friend and former ally of El Diablo, entered the room. He was followed by a group of rebels, people who had once served El Diablo but had turned against him. They were all ready to fight back, to finally end El Diablo's reign of terror. The fight that followed was intense. Gunshots rang out, and the sounds of fighting echoed through the mansion. El Diablo's guards, though many, were not prepared for the rebellion. Arturo and the rebels fought hard, knowing this was their only chance. El Diablo's power, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now fading. His empire was crumbling. In the final moments, it was just Arturo and El Diablo left. The two men faced each other in the middle of the room. El Diablo was angry, but he was also scared. His power was slipping away. "You thought you could control everything," Arturo said, his voice steady, "but you're not untouchable. You were the one who was broken." El Diablo raised his hand, ready to strike, but before he could do anything, Arturo pulled out a gun and fired. El Diablo fell to the ground, his reign of terror ending with one shot. The mansion was silent after El Diablo's death. His empire was over. His guards scattered, and his wealth and power disappeared. The people who had once been afraid of him now saw a chance for a new life, free from fear. Arturo, who had once been a servant, had become a hero. He had stopped El Diablo, and with him, the darkness that had ruled their lives for so long. The rebels who helped Arturo took the opportunity to rebuild, working together to fix the damage caused by El Diablo. They began to heal the broken communities, and people slowly started to rebuild their lives. But Arturo knew the fight was far from over. Evil never truly disappears. There would always be others who wanted power, who wanted to hurt others to get what they wanted. But Arturo was ready. He promised himself that he would keep fighting, to make sure no one would ever again fall under the control of someone like El Diablo. The world was now a little safer, but there would always be a need for men like Arturo, those who were willing to stand up to evil, no matter the cost. And for Arturo, that was enough. In the quaint coastal town of Misty Harbor, there was a boy named Leo. Leo was unlike most of his classmates, who spent their days playing soccer on the sandy beaches or hanging out at the local arcade. Leo preferred the company of shadows, exploring the eerie remnants of old buildings and wandering the misty shores, where the waves whispered secrets to the sand. From an early age, Leo found himself fascinated by death and what lay beyond. While other kids shied away from the town cemetery, Leo felt drawn to it. He often sat on a weathered bench, watching as families mourned their loved ones. To him, the stillness of the graveyard was calming, a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the world. As Leo grew older, his curiosity deepened. When he heard about a job opening at the local morgue, he felt a strange excitement. It wasn't a place most people wanted to work, but for Leo, it felt like a calling. After a tense interview, he was hired, and soon he found himself spending more time with the dead than with the living. The morgue was a cold, sterile place, filled with the scent of antiseptic. Leo loved it. He learned to prepare bodies for funerals, clean the floors, and organize the tools. The silence felt like a warm blanket around him, wrapping him in a sense of belonging that he had never felt before. One stormy night, after all the staff had gone home, Leo encountered a new arrival, a young woman named Mia. She had been in a tragic accident, and her body lay on the steel table, covered with a white sheet. Leo felt an inexplicable urge to approach her. He pulled back the sheet and studied her face, which looked peaceful despite the circumstances. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her cold hand. A shiver ran down his spine, and for a moment, he felt a connection that transcended life and death. Leo lay down beside Mia, feeling her stillness envelop him. In that instant, he found a sense of peace he had never known. After that night, Leo's visits to the morgue became a secret part of his life. He would sneak in after hours, lying beside Mia, and feeling the weight of his emotions lift in her presence. He knew it was strange, but he couldn't help it. Each visit deepened his obsession, and soon he craved more than just the quiet company of the dead. Meanwhile, Leo's life took an unexpected turn when he met Clara at school. She was the brightest star in his universe, always laughing, surrounded by friends and full of life. Leo watched her from afar, admiring her kindness and radiant smile. He was captivated, and after weeks of mustering courage, he finally decided to confess his feelings. One sunny afternoon, Leo found Clara sitting alone on a bench, reading a book. His heart raced as he approached her. "Clara," he said softly, "can I talk to you for a moment?" She looked up, her eyes sparkling. "Sure, Leo, what's up?" Taking a deep breath, he blurted out, "I like you, Clara. I really like you. Would you want to go out with me?" Her expression shifted and she hesitated. "Oh, Leo, that's sweet. But I'm not looking for a relationship right now. I'm sorry." Leo's heart sank. He forced a smile, but inside he felt shattered. Clara's rejection echoed in his mind, intensifying his obsession with Mia, who could never say no to him. He returned to the morgue, seeking comfort in the cold embrace of the dead. Weeks passed, and Leo's visits to Mia grew more frequent. Then one day, a terrible tragedy struck Misty Harbor. Clara collapsed at school, and despite the frantic attempts to save her, she was pronounced dead. Leo felt an icy grip of fear and sadness as he learned that Clara's body would be taken to the morgue. The thought of seeing her one last time both thrilled and terrified him. That night, the air was thick with anticipation as Leo snuck into the morgue. He hesitated outside the cold room, his heart pounding in his chest. When he finally entered, there lay Clara, covered by a white sheet. He pulled it back, revealing her familiar face, now peaceful in death. Leo lay down next to her, his heart racing with a mix of emotions: grief, love, and an unsettling thrill. Suddenly, Clara's hand twitched. Leo jumped back in shock, unsure if he was imagining things. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from Amir, his best friend. "Hey, Leo, I'm coming over. Let's hang out." Panic surged through Leo. He didn't want to share Clara with anyone, not even Amir. In a moment of desperation, he grabbed a heavy object nearby and swung it at Amir as he entered the morgue. Amir fell to the ground, and Leo's heart raced as he realized the terrible mistake he had made. Terrified, Leo dragged Amir's unconscious body outside, hoping no one would discover what had happened. But luck was not on his side. A passerby spotted Amir and called for help. When Amir woke up in the hospital, he told the doctors everything about Leo, the morgue, and the dark secret they shared. The police quickly found Leo at home, trying to act normal. They arrested him, and the shocking truth of his actions came to light in court. He and Amir faced serious charges for their twisted behavior. The town of Misty Harbor was in disbelief, struggling to understand how two boys could be involved in such darkness. While in prison, Leo reflected on the choices he had made. Each day was a reminder of the pain he had caused and the love he had lost. He thought about Clara, the girl who had filled his heart with light, and how he had let his obsession lead him down a dark path. One day, Leo received a letter from Amir, who was also serving time in another facility. Amir wrote about his nightmares, the guilt and fear that haunted him every night, and how he wished they could turn back time. Leo felt the same way, longing for a chance to make things right. As they served their sentences, the two boys began to understand that true freedom comes from within. They started attending counseling sessions, facing their fears, and slowly working to change their lives for the better. Leo often thought about Clara and Mia, realizing that they deserved more than just being part of his dark fantasies. Years passed, and when Leo was finally released from prison, he stepped into the sunlight with a heavy heart, but a clearer mind. He knew he had a long road ahead to rebuild his life and seek forgiveness from the people he had hurt. Back in Misty Harbor, Leo visited Clara's grave. He placed flowers on her headstone, whispering an apology for the pain he had caused and the love he had lost. It was time to honor her memory by living a life that reflected the light she had brought into his world. Leo's journey was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, change is possible. Our choices can shape our paths, but it's never too late to seek a different way. The shadows of the past may linger, but with accountability and a desire to do better, we can step into the light once more. As he walked away from the cemetery, Leo felt a sense of hope. He was determined to make amends, to find a way to live in a world that valued life, love, and the connections that truly matter. In the peaceful village of Eldoria, there lived a woman named Mira. She was as poor as the dry, cracked earth beneath her feet. Her clothes looked like old rags, full of holes and barely covering her thin body. Inside, her heart felt like an empty shell, and her home was not much better. The roof leaked whenever it rained, and cold winds blew through the broken windows, making her feel even more alone. Mira had no bed. Every night she curled up on the hard floor like a hungry cat, trying to stay warm. Each evening, Mira prayed for a better life, hoping that tomorrow would be different. But every morning, she faced the same struggles. She worked hard to survive by collecting water for others, washing their clothes, and helping on their farms. But no matter how much she toiled, her hands always came back empty. It felt as though the world had turned its back on her. Mira watched her friends, women she had grown up with, living happily with their husbands and children. They wore beautiful clothes, and their homes were filled with laughter and joy. In contrast, Mira had no husband, no children, and no one to call her own. The villagers whispered behind her back, claiming she was cursed and that she was born with bad luck. Even the men kept their distance, afraid that her misfortune might rub off on them. Mira's life was like a sad story, and she walked through the village like a shadow, unnoticed, unloved, and unwanted. Still, despite everything, she kept going, holding on to the hope that one day the sun would shine brighter for her. But that day had not yet come. One hot afternoon, Mira carried a bundle of her tattered clothes to the river. The sun beat down hard, and the water sparkled like melted silver. She knelt by the river, scrubbing her rags with hands as rough as the village roads. The sound of the rushing water was the only comfort she had. As she washed, she heard the soft sound of footsteps behind her. Startled, she turned around, her heart racing like a frightened bird. Standing tall and proud was a woman dressed in clothing so fine that it seemed to belong to a queen. Her skin glowed, her jewelry sparkled, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. "Good day," the woman said, her voice smooth and sweet like honey. Mira blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "Good day, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer. "My name is Lena. I've been watching you, Mira. I know your struggles." Mira's eyes widened in surprise. How did this stranger know her name? Lena smiled as if she could read Mira's thoughts. "I have a business opportunity for you. It's simple and will change your life," she said. Mira stared, her mind racing with questions. What kind of business? Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of crisp notes. "You will collect used clothes from the villagers. Bring as many as you can, and for every load I will pay you handsomely." Mira's jaw dropped. "Clothes?" she asked, confusion thick in her voice. "Yes," Lena replied firmly. Don't ask questions. Just do as I say, and you'll never be poor again." With that, she handed Mira the money and turned to leave. "Remember," she said, "I'll be waiting." Mira sat by the river, clutching the money, her mind swirling with confusion. What kind of business was this? Why clothes? She didn't understand, but the weight of the money in her hand felt real. For the first time in her life, hope stirred in her chest. She packed her clothes and headed home, her heart beating rapidly with excitement. The next morning, Mira woke up with a plan. She knew the villagers might be suspicious if she asked only for clothes, so she decided to make her trade seem normal. With the money Lena had given her, Mira went to the market and bought colorful baskets and bowls, big and small, each one shining brightly in the morning sun. When she returned to the village, she knocked on the first door. An old woman opened it, narrowing her eyes at Mira. "Good morning, Ma," Mira greeted, holding up a bright blue basket. "I'm exchanging these for any old clothes, shoes, or garments you don't need." The old woman frowned. "Old clothes? Shoes? What kind of business is that?" "It's for a new venture," Mira explained, her voice steady. "If you have anything you're not using, I'll trade you this nice basket." The old woman's eyes lit up at the sight of the basket, and without hesitation, she went inside and returned with a pile of old clothes and shoes. Mira smiled. "Thank you, Ma. Here's your basket." At each house, it was the same. The villagers eagerly handed over their unwanted items for Mira's shiny baskets and bowls. By the end of the day, her sack was full, bulging with clothes, shoes, and most importantly, garments. That night, Mira sat in her small hut, sorting through her collection. She carefully separated the garments and placed them in a special sack, taking the other clothes outside to burn them in a hidden spot near the river. The flames crackled, consuming the evidence, while Mira watched, her face glowing in the firelight. The next day, she delivered the sack of garments to Lena by the river. "You've done well," Lena said, her voice smooth and confident. She handed Mira a thick bundle of money. Mira's heart soared as she clutched the payment. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling hope rise in her chest. Lena smiled, her eyes sharp. "Keep working, Mira. Your life is about to change." And so Mira's trade continued, each day bringing her closer to a life she never thought possible, while the villagers remained oblivious to the secret hidden beneath her newfound success. Before long, the news of Mira's trade spread through Eldoria like wildfire. Her colorful baskets and shiny bowls became the talk of the village. From the oldest grandmothers to the youngest brides, everyone was eager to exchange their old clothes, shoes, and most importantly, garments for Mira's fine goods. "Have you seen Mira's new bowls?" one woman asked her neighbor. "Yes, I traded my husband's old shirts yesterday and got one. It's beautiful," the neighbor replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Whenever Mira arrived in the village with her baskets, a crowd would gather instantly. Women pushed and shoved, each trying to hand over their old items first. Mira never lacked customers, and her sacks were always full by the end of the day. With Lena's regular payments, Mira's life began to change for the better. She repaired her leaky hut, replacing the torn roof with sturdy palm leaves. Her windows were covered, keeping the cold winds out. At night, she even bought new clothes, bright and colorful, like the women she once envied. For the first time, Mira could eat well. No more begging or struggling. Her days of hunger were finally over. The villagers noticed her transformation and began to talk. "Look at Mira," they whispered. "She's no longer the poor woman we knew. Maybe her business is truly blessed." But while her days were filled with laughter and trade, her nights hid a darker secret. When the village slept, Mira would quietly gather her sacks of sorted garments and, like a shadow, slip through the narrow paths toward the river. Under the moonlight, she would meet Lena, who always waited with a knowing smile. They exchanged only a few words, but each time, Lena would take the sack of garments and hand Mira her payment. No one in the village knew about these nightly meetings. To them, Mira's success was a simple tale of hard work. But in the dark near the river, something strange and unspoken was happening, and soon it would catch the attention of a curious neighbor. Mira's trade grew bigger than anyone in Eldoria could have imagined. She didn't stop at her village. Soon she started visiting neighboring villages, her baskets gleaming like the morning sun. Everywhere she went, villagers eagerly gathered their old clothes, shoes, and garments, waiting for her next visit. "Mira is coming tomorrow," they would say, excitement bubbling like a pot of soup. Everyone wanted a piece of her trade. Back in Eldoria, Mira's life was a marvel. Her once broken heart now stood strong and proud. Her clothes were fresh and her meals were satisfying. But while most villagers celebrated her success, one woman remained suspicious. Her neighbor, Talia, had always been sharp-eyed and couldn't ignore the strange pattern. Every night while others slept, Mira would carry her sacks and disappear into the darkness, returning hours later with a calm expression, though her eyes held a different story. One night, curiosity gripped Talia tightly. She wrapped herself in a thick shawl and waited by her window, watching Mira. As expected, Mira left her home with a heavy sack slung over her shoulder. Talia followed her, keeping a safe distance. The air was chilly, and the night was eerily quiet, but Talia pressed on, hiding behind trees and bushes until they reached the river. Crouching low, Talia peered through the tall grass, her eyes widening when she saw a figure sitting on a large rock by the riverbank. It was Lena, her rich clothes glowing softly under the moonlight. Around her, candles flickered, their flames dancing in a perfect circle. Mira approached, dropping her sack in front of Lena without a word. Lena opened the sack, pulling out only the garments and pushing the rest aside. Then Lena began to chant, her voice low and rhythmic, like the hum of bees. Talia's breath caught in her throat as she watched. Lena raised her hands and suddenly the garments vanished into thin air, leaving behind a faint, eerie glow. A strange laughter echoed through the night, sending chills down Talia's spine. Her legs trembled and her heart pounded like a drum. She wanted to know. Her legs trembled and her heart pounded like a drum. She wanted to run, but her feet felt as if they were stuck in mud. What had she just witnessed? Who was Lena? And what was she doing with the villagers' garments? Fear gripped Talia as she quietly retreated, her mind racing. She had seen enough for one night, but she knew this was just the beginning of a frightening truth. Talia's heart raced as she stumbled back through the dark forest, the eerie laughter from the river still echoing in her ears. Every rustle of leaves felt like a hand reaching for her. Clutching her shawl tightly, she moved as fast as she could, but the weight of fear made her legs feel heavy. She didn't stop until she reached home, slamming the door shut. Breathing heavily, she locked it and pressed her back against the wood, her heart racing. The shadows in her room seemed to stretch and move, and the silence was deafening. Talia sat in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes darting around the room. Sleep refused to come as her mind replayed the scene by the river. The candles, the chants, the disappearing garments, and Lena's haunting laughter. She hugged herself tighter, whispering prayers under her breath, begging for the night to end. At the first light of dawn, Talia could take no more. She threw on her wrapper and rushed out, heading straight to the elder's house. Her bare feet slapped against the dirt paths, stirring dust as she ran. When she arrived, the elders were just waking up, their faces lined with sleep and age. But the panic in Talia's eyes erased their weariness. "What is it?" one elder asked, his voice heavy with concern. "It's Mira," Talia cried, her words tumbling over each other. "She goes to the river every night. There's a woman, Lena. She's doing something dark with our clothes. I saw it with my own eyes." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. "What did you see?" another elder asked, leaning forward. Talia took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "There were candles. Lena was chanting. She took only the garments, and then they vanished. After that, there was laughter, evil laughter." The elders sat in silence, their faces growing more serious with each word. Finally, one of them rose. "This is a grave matter. We must summon Mira at once." The village bell rang, its sharp clang waking everyone. Men, women, and children gathered quickly in the square, murmuring among themselves. "What's happening?" they asked, confusion filling the air. When Mira arrived, her face was calm, but her eyes showed her anxiety. The elders stood before the crowd, their expressions grim. "Mira," the head elder began, "your neighbor Talia has brought a troubling report. She says she followed you to the river last night and saw things that concern the safety of this village. We demand an explanation." The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Mira. The air was thick with tension, and even the smallest breeze carried whispers of fear. Mira stood in the center of the village square, her legs shaking like leaves in the wind. The villagers' eyes bore into her, their faces a mix of fear and anger. She swallowed hard, but her throat felt dry. "Mira," the head elder said again, his voice sharp. "Speak, what are you hiding?" Mira looked down, her hands tightly gripped together. I can't," she whispered. "I took an oath. If I speak, I will go mad or die." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers rose like the hum of bees. "An oath? What kind of oath?" The head elder frowned and turned to one of the younger men. "Bring the chief priest," he ordered. The villagers waited in tense silence until the chief priest arrived, his long staff tapping against the ground with each step. His sharp and knowing eyes scanned the crowd before settling on Mira. "You've taken an oath," the priest said, his voice deep and commanding. Mira nodded, tears streaming down her face. The priest raised his staff and began to chant, his voice rising and falling like the waves of a river. The air grew heavy and a strange stillness settled over the square. The villagers watched in awe as the priest's chant seemed to wrap around Mira like an invisible rope. Finally, the priest stopped and pointed his staff at her. "Speak," he commanded. "The spirit will protect you." Mira fell to her knees, trembling. "It's Lena," she sobbed. "She's not an ordinary woman. She forced me to collect your garments to steal your lives." The villagers gasped in horror. "Our lives?" someone shouted. Mira nodded, her tears falling freely. "Yes, she told me she would make me rich if I helped her. Every time I bring her garments, she performs rituals. She uses them to take your strength, your fortune, your very souls to grow her wealth." The villagers stared in shock, their faces pale. "I had no choice," Mira cried. "She said if I didn't take the oath and obey her, she would kill me. I was desperate. I'm so sorry." The head elder's face hardened. He turned to the chief priest. "What can we do?" The priest stroked his beard thoughtfully. "We must find Lena and destroy her power. Only then can we break her hold on the village." The crowd erupted in a mix of fear and anger. The once celebrated trade of baskets and bowls had turned into a dark tale of deceit and danger, revealing the true cost of their discarded clothes. The chief priest stood tall, his staff firmly planted in the ground, his eyes sharp as a hawk sweeping over the gathered villagers. The square was so silent that even the rustling leaves seemed afraid to make a sound. "This is no ordinary matter," the priest said, his voice echoing. "A powerful witch hides among us, feeding on your lives through the work of Lena. But fear not, the spirits have spoken, and they will guide us to break this curse." The villagers shifted nervously, some clutching their children, while others murmured prayers under their breath. "Now," the priest continued, "if you have ever given your garments to Mira, step forward. The curse cannot be lifted if you hide." For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, women began to step forward, their faces pale with fear. One by one, they stood before the priest, their heads bowed in shame and terror. "I gave 3 pairs," admitted an elderly woman as she joined the line. "Me too," whispered a young mother, clutching her baby tightly. Soon more women came forward until nearly half the village stood before the priest. The men watched in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mix of anger and fear. The priest raised his staff, drawing a circle in the dirt around the gathered women. He began to chant, his voice deep and rhythmic, each word carrying the weight of ancient power. The air grew dense and the villagers felt a strange pull, as if the very ground beneath them was alive. He called upon the spirits of the land, the river, and the skies. The flames of the ceremonial torches flickered wildly, and a cool wind swept through the square. The villagers shivered, though the night was warm. As the chants grew louder, the women inside the circle began to sway, their eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, the priest's voice rose sharply, and the circle of dirt around them lit up with a faint, eerie glow. "The curse is breaking," the priest declared, "but it will not fully lift until Lena's power is destroyed." The villagers murmured in awe, but their fear remained. They knew the battle was not over. Lena, the witch behind it all, still lurked somewhere in the shadows, her dark power threatening them all. The chief priest, now armed with the full power of the spirits, closed his eyes and raised his staff high. His chants grew deeper, his words sharp like a hunter's knife. The air thickened, and a sudden gust of wind swirled through the village square, lifting dust and leaves. The villagers held their breath, their eyes fixed on the priest. "She is close," the priest declared, his voice booming. "Her lair lies near the river, hidden beneath the old baobab tree." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The baobab tree was a place children were warned to stay away from, said to be cursed by dark spirits. Now the truth of those old tales chilled their hearts. "We must end this now," the priest said. "Her power weakens, but she is still dangerous." Led by the priest, the villagers grabbed sticks, stones, and torches, their faces set in grim determination as they marched toward the river. The once familiar path felt darker, each step echoing with the weight of their mission. When they reached the baobab tree, the priest pointed his staff at the ground. "Here," he said, "her coven lies below." With a nod, the strongest men began to dig. It wasn't long before they uncovered a hidden entrance, a small, dark tunnel leading underground, the air around it thick and foul, reeking of decay and magic. "Bring her out," the priest commanded. Two brave men entered the tunnel, their torches lighting the way. Moments later, they emerged, dragging a struggling figure behind them. It was Lena, her once glorious robes now tattered, her face twisted in rage and fear. "You fools!" she spat, her voice like the hiss of a snake. "You dare defy me? You will all perish!" The villagers recoiled, but the priest stepped forward, unfazed. He began chanting again, his staff glowing with a soft light. Lena screamed, clutching her head as if the words burned her. Her power was fading. One by one, the villagers stormed her lair, smashing charms, candles, and strange artifacts scattered inside. Each item destroyed seemed to weaken Lena further, her screams growing fainter. Finally, the priest raised his staff. "It is done," he said. "She is powerless." The villagers dragged Lena back to the square, where they tied her to the old tree in the center, the very tree under which the village once held its joyous celebrations. Now it bore witness to their darkest trial. "You have stolen from us," the head elder said, his voice heavy with anger. "You have cursed our people. Today your reign of terror ends." Without hesitation, the villagers picked up stones, their fear and rage fueling their actions. The air filled with the sound of rocks striking wood and flesh. Lena's screams echoed briefly before fading into silence. When it was over, the villagers stood in solemn silence. The witch who had brought so much pain was no more. The air felt lighter, and the square seemed brighter. As if the spirits themselves were relieved, the chief priest raised his hands. "The village is free," he declared, "but let this be a lesson. Evil thrives where greed and secrecy grow. We must remain vigilant." The villagers nodded, their hearts heavy yet relieved. They had won, but the memory of Lena's dark deeds would linger forever. Though Lena's reign had ended, her curse left scars on those closest to her scheme. Mira and Talia bore the weight of their choices. For Mira, her bravery came at a cost, her sight. The morning after Lena's death, Talia woke to darkness. The once bright world of Eldoria was now a void, and she cried bitterly. Mira too suffered. Her legs, once strong enough to carry sacks of clothes, could barely support her. Every step was painful, her body trembling under the weight of guilt. The villagers turned to the chief priest once more. He performed rituals, chanting and calling upon the spirits. Slowly, Talia's sight returned. Tears of gratitude streamed down her face as the village came back into view. But for Mira, the healing was not complete. Though the priest tried, her legs remained weak. Limping, she knelt before the villagers, tears falling freely. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Forgive me. I was blinded by greed and fear. I never meant to bring harm to you all." The villagers watched in silence. Some felt pity, while others were still angry. Mira's sorrow was deep, but her actions had nearly destroyed them. Mira's shame grew too heavy to bear. Though the villagers no longer cursed her name aloud, their cold stares and whispered words haunted her every step. She knew she could not stay. One morning, with nothing but a small bundle, Mira left Eldoria. She limped down the dusty road, her heart heavy. The village watched her go, their faces a mix of relief and sadness. Her name became a lesson, a warning of what could happen when desperation meets deceit. Parents told their children of Mira, the woman who traded their safety for riches. While Mira left in shame, Talia stayed and was celebrated. The villagers saw her as a hero. Her courage in following Mira had saved them all. Grateful, the king's son took Talia as his wife. The village rejoiced, their hearts lifted by the union. Talia's bravery was rewarded, and she became a symbol of strength and resilience. The story of Mira and the stolen garments became legend, told around fires and under moonlit skies. Elders warned children of the dangers of greed and hidden evil. Remember, they would say, evil often comes in the guise of opportunity. Though Eldoria returned to peace, the memory of those dark days lingered. The villagers remained wary of strange trades and mysterious figures. Mira's name lived on, not as a curse, but as a reminder of lessons learned. And so, the tale of the woman who traded garments for riches became woven into the very fabric of Eldoria, passed down through generations, ensuring the village never forgot the cost of their trust. If you have been enjoying my stories, kindly follow up for more, as I will be bringing you interesting tales weekly, and don't forget to kindly share to your loved ones. Peace. In a peaceful village nestled between the tall mountains of the Mbali region, there lived a boy named Kofi. He was a cheerful and lively boy, known for his bright smile and playful spirit. Kofi lived with his mother, Amina, in a small, cozy hut made of clay and thatch. Amina was a kind and wise woman, loved by all in the village for her gentle nature and delicious meals. The aroma of her cooking often wafted through their home, bringing joy to Kofi's heart. Kofi's father, Abasi, was a brave warrior who had dedicated his life to protecting their village. He was often away on long missions, working as a peacekeeper in nearby regions. Kofi admired his father greatly and looked forward to the stories Abasi would tell upon his return. But as time passed, Kofi began to feel the weight of his father's absence more than ever. With his father gone, Kofi often played with the children of the village, but deep down, he felt lonely. One day, while wandering near a sparkling river, Kofi met Zuri, a girl from the neighboring village. Zuri was beautiful, with laughter that danced like music in the air. They quickly became friends, sharing secrets and dreams under the shade of a large baobab tree. As the days turned into weeks, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. One moonlit night, as the stars twinkled above them, Kofi and Zuri found themselves wrapped in the magic of young love. They shared a kiss, a moment filled with sweetness and innocence. But in the days that followed, Kofi's heart was filled with worry. He knew that their actions could bring trouble, and soon Amina discovered that she was pregnant. When Amina learned of her pregnancy, her heart raced with fear and confusion. She knew the traditions of their village. A boy becoming a father before marriage was frowned upon, and she worried about how Abasi would react when he returned home. Kofi too felt panic rising within him. He loved Zuri dearly, but the thought of disappointing his father filled him with dread. As the weeks passed, Kofi became more withdrawn, haunted by guilt and anxiety. Amina tried to comfort him, reassuring him that they would figure it out together. She spoke of love and understanding, but Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing. He feared for both Zuri and his mother, knowing that the truth could shatter their family. Finally, the day came when Abasi returned home. The village erupted in joy, celebrating their hero's safe return. The sound of drums and laughter filled the air, but Kofi felt a heavy weight in his chest. He watched as the villagers welcomed his father, their smiles bright and their voices loud with praise. That night, after the celebrations had quieted, Abasi sat with Amina and Kofi around the fire. The flickering flames cast shadows on their faces as they shared stories. But Kofi could see the concern in his father's eyes. Abasi was perceptive and knew when something was wrong. "Amina, my love, is everything well?" he asked, his brow furrowing with worry. Before Amina could respond, Kofi felt an urge to confess. "Father, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. I love Zuri, and I made a mistake. She's pregnant." The air became heavy with silence. Abasi's face turned dark, and Kofi felt his heart drop. "You have brought shame upon our family." Abasi's voice was thunderous, echoing in the still night. "How could you betray your mother and me like this?" Amina, trying to calm her husband, spoke softly. "Abasi, let us find a way to make this right. Kofi is still our son, and we can help him." But Abasi was furious, his anger blinding him to reason. He turned on Amina, blaming her for Kofi's actions. "You were supposed to guide him. You have failed." Kofi's heart ached as he watched his parents fight. "No, father, please, we can talk about this," he cried out, desperation filling his voice. But Abasi, consumed by rage, could not hear his son's pleas. In a moment of madness, Abasi drew his weapon, his eyes wild with fury. "You will both pay for this betrayal," he shouted, his voice filled with sorrow and madness. Kofi lunged forward, trying to protect his mother, but it was too late. The tragedy unfolded in an instant. The screams echoed through the night, piercing the hearts of everyone in the village. The following morning, the village was shrouded in a thick silence, a heavy fog of grief hanging in the air. The villagers gathered, their faces pale and filled with shock, as news of the tragic events spread like wildfire. Abasi, once a proud warrior, was now a man broken by his own actions. He wandered through the village, lost and haunted by the ghosts of his wife and son, consumed by guilt and sorrow. Days turned into weeks, and the village mourned the loss of Amina and Kofi. The laughter that once filled their home was replaced by an unbearable silence. The elders gathered to discuss the tragedy, their voices heavy with sorrow. This is a lesson for all of us," one elder said. "We must learn to communicate and to love one another openly. Anger can destroy what we hold most dear." The villagers honored Amina and Kofi by planting a tree near the river, where Kofi and Zuri had first met. They called it the Tree of Remembrance, a place where they could reflect on the love that had blossomed there and the tragedy that followed. They told stories of Amina's kindness and Kofi's laughter, ensuring that their memories would never fade. As for Abasi, he became a shadow of his former self, wandering the mountains alone. The weight of his actions bore down on him like a heavy stone, and he was forever haunted by the faces of his loved ones. He spent his days searching for forgiveness, but found none. The village, once filled with joy, now carried the burden of loss, a reminder of how love, when hidden, could lead to devastating consequences. And so, the story of Kofi and Amina became a cautionary tale told by the fireside for generations to come. It reminded the villagers of the importance of love, trust, and open communication, ensuring that the shadows of betrayal would never again darken their homes. In the Mbali region, the story lived on, echoing through the hills and valleys, a testament to the enduring power of love and the lessons learned from the depths of sorrow. According to some legends, the Anunnaki decided to create humans to serve as their labor force. They used their advanced genetic engineering skills to create humans from the DNA of existing species. This act of creating humans is seen by some as a way to ensure their mining operations could continue smoothly. The Anunnaki are often described as powerful beings, sometimes depicted as gods in ancient texts. They are believed to come from a planet called Nibiru, which is said to be part of our solar system. Nibiru is often described as a large, mysterious planet with a long elliptical orbit around the sun. This means that it takes a very long time for Nibiru to complete one full journey around the sun, possibly thousands of years. The story goes that the Anunnaki had advanced technology, allowing them to travel through space. They made the long journey from Nibiru to Earth in huge spacecraft. This journey was not easy, as they had to navigate through the vastness of space, facing unknown dangers along the way. They were seeking something important on Earth, which is often thought to be gold or other valuable resources. One of the main reasons the Anunnaki are said to have come to Earth was to mine for gold. According to some theories, they needed gold to help repair the atmosphere of their home planet, Nibiru. The atmosphere on Nibiru was deteriorating, and gold was believed to be a key element in restoring it. This need for gold led them to Earth, where they believed they could find an abundance of this precious metal. When the Anunnaki arrived on Earth, they are said to have landed in ancient Mesopotamia, an area that is now part of modern-day Iraq. They established their presence and began to explore the planet. The Anunnaki were impressed by the resources that Earth had to offer, including its rich minerals and fertile land. As the Anunnaki began to mine gold, they faced a significant challenge. The labor required to extract the gold was too much for them alone. They needed workers to help them. According to some legends, the Anunnaki decided to create humans to serve as their labor force. They used their advanced genetic engineering skills to create humans from the DNA of existing species. This act of creating humans is seen by some as a way to ensure their mining operations could continue smoothly. Before the Anunnaki left Nibiru, there was a conflict among their ranks. Some factions disagreed about the best way to handle their dwindling resources and the deteriorating condition of their planet. This internal struggle led to a fight for power, with different groups wanting to take control of the situation. The reasons for the conflict are varied. Some Anunnaki believed that they should focus on finding new resources, while others thought it was better to strengthen their existing technology and improve conditions on Nibiru. This disagreement caused tension among them, leading to a split. Some factions were more aggressive, wanting to take drastic actions, while others sought a peaceful resolution. The conflict on Nibiru ultimately played a role in their decision to come to Earth. Those who believed in the idea of finding new resources and expanding their reach were more inclined to travel to Earth. They sought to establish a new base from which they could extract the resources they needed. The internal strife had weakened their unity, and some factions decided to leave Nibiru to avoid further conflict. Once the Anunnaki settled on Earth, they began to build their civilization. They constructed cities and established systems of governance. The Anunnaki were said to be wise and powerful, teaching early humans many things about agriculture, astronomy, and mathematics. They shared knowledge that helped human societies grow and develop. The Anunnaki's relationship with humans was complex. While they created humans to serve them, there were also times of cooperation and teaching. Humans learned from the Anunnaki, and in return, the Anunnaki benefited from human labor. This interaction led to a mix of admiration and fear among the humans. Some viewed the Anunnaki as gods, while others saw them as rulers who demanded too much. As time went on, the Anunnaki presence on Earth began to wane. There are many theories about why this happened. Some suggest that they eventually returned to Nibiru, either because they found the resources they needed or because their mission was complete. Others believe that over time, the Anunnaki lost interest in Earth as human civilizations grew stronger and more independent. Even after the Anunnaki left, their influence remained. Many ancient cultures have stories about gods and beings who came from the stars. The tales of the Anunnaki have been passed down through generations, morphing into myths and legends that still capture the imagination today. In conclusion, the story of the Anunnaki is one of exploration, conflict, and the quest for resources. Their journey from Nibiru to Earth is filled with intriguing elements, from the creation of humans to the internal struggles that led to their departure. While much of this tale is rooted in legend and interpretation, it continues to inspire and provoke thought about humanity's origins and our place in the universe. Enjoyed my story? Kindly subscribe to this channel to stay updated in peace. Once upon a time in the peaceful village of Eldoria, surrounded by tall mountains and flowing rivers, everyone lived by a special rule. The girls had to stay pure until they got married. This rule made the families proud, and they often bragged about their daughter's innocence, dreaming of the day they would marry wealthy princes. One day, a dark cloud fell over Eldoria. Crops began to die and animals fell ill. The villagers were scared and confused, so they sought help from Eldrin, the wise oracle of the village. He revealed a shocking truth. Only a true virgin could lift the curse on the village. The girl who succeeded would not only save the village, but also win the heart of the handsome prince. Excited, all the parents rushed to the palace with their daughters, believing they were pure. They gathered in the grand hall as Eldrin stood with a big pot. "In this pot is a magical necklace," he announced. "Only a true virgin can pull it out." One by one, the girls reached into the pot, but each time they pulled out empty hands. The crowd grew restless and worried. When the chief's daughters, known for their beauty, stepped up, hope soared. But they too couldn't find the necklace, leaving the villagers shocked and worried. Whispers soon filled the air, and attention turned to Lyra, a new girl from the city. She was lively and wore bright clothes that caught everyone's eye. The villagers began to blame her for leading their daughters astray. Unbeknownst to them, Lyra had a secret. While charming everyone with her looks, she was secretly meeting men and accepting gifts. Inspired by Lyra's boldness, the village girls started to follow her example. They wanted attention and gifts just like her. Kaylin, a curious girl, decided to follow Lyra one day. She discovered Lyra's secret meetings and felt a thrill of excitement. Kaylin couldn't keep it to herself and shared what she learned with her friends. Soon, more girls joined in, abandoning their traditional values in pursuit of excitement. With each passing day, the village changed. The girls began dressing up and seeking attention, forgetting the customs they had always respected. Lyra led the way, and the thrill of receiving gifts became more important than their traditions. Eldrin was called again. He revealed that the curse would only get worse unless 2 pure maidens could be found for a sacred sacrifice. Panic spread through the village as they realized their daughters, once their pride, had lost their purity. The villagers called for all maidens to gather at the palace once more. Eldrin conducted the test again, but it became clear that no girl in the village was a virgin anymore. The villagers were heartbroken and felt betrayed. Blame quickly fell on Lyra, who was seen as the cause of their troubles. The elders decided that Lyra must take responsibility for her actions. She would carry the sacrifice alone as punishment for the chaos she had caused. With a heavy heart, Lyra set off on a lonely journey to the sacred altar, reflecting on the hurt she had brought to the village. As she walked through the forest, she felt the weight of her choices. When she finally reached the altar, she prayed for forgiveness, hoping to lift the curse. After completing her task, she returned to Eldoria, where the curse had finally lifted. But the villagers still looked at her with disappointment. The elders declared that Lyra must stay in the village for 12 years, isolated from others, to reflect on her actions. She was given a small hut near the shrine, where she spent her days carrying out sacrifices and maintaining the shrine. Though she was alone, Lyra learned important lessons about respect and the value of traditions. As the years passed, the village slowly healed, and the importance of their customs was reinforced. Lyra's story became a cautionary tale, reminding everyone of the importance of making good choices and respecting their heritage. In the end, Eldoria learned from Lyra's mistakes, ensuring that their traditions would never be forgotten again. Lyra's journey taught her that true worth comes from within, and though her past was filled with regret, it led her to a deeper understanding of herself and her community. And so, the tale of Lyra became a cherished story in Eldoria, filled with lessons of caution, redemption, and the strength of tradition.